Welcome to Pillowtime Lore. This is your soft corner of the night, a place where stories live like warm embers, glowing in the dark. Before we begin, take a moment to slow down. Let your body melt into whatever holds you, your bed, your chair, or that cozy blanket wrapped around your shoulders. Feel how the day begins to drift away, piece by piece, as if it never belonged to you in the first place. Outside your window, the night is calm. The world has quieted down, and the sky has dressed itself in stars. Imagine gentle snowflakes floating in the distance, each one falling without hurry, without noise, just a silent rhythm to remind you that everything is allowed to slow. And here, in this moment, so are you. The glow of a fireplace flickers softly nearby, its warmth wrapping around you like an embrace. The golden light catches on shelves of books, on soft pillows, on every little detail that makes a room feel like home. You breathe in, and the air feels gentle, safe, peaceful. You breathe out, and the weight of today slips further and further away. There is nothing you need to do right now. No expectation, no demand, only rest, only stillness, only the quiet anticipation of a story that will soon take you by the hand and guide you through places that exist just beyond the edge of dreams. So, let the rhythm of your breath carry you deeper into calm. With every inhale, feel your body fill with ease. With every exhale, imagine the clutter of the day dissolving like mist. You are free now, free to wander through the world of tales where time is slower, and every word is a lantern leading you further into comfort. This is Pillowtime Lore, and tonight, a story awaits you. In a city where the harbor glimmers with warm fairy lights, and the streets are alive with whispers and secrets, not everything is as it seems. Behind the cheerful bustle, envy and greed wait in the shadows, and lives can change with a single choice or betrayal. This is a tale of courage tested, of hearts broken and rebuilt, of dreams stolen and reclaimed. It is a story of mystery, adventure, and carefully woven revenge, where every secret and every decision shapes destiny. As you listen, you will travel from the glittering city streets to dark prison walls, to hidden islands of treasure and masked identities. You will witness betrayal and loyalty, despair and hope, and a young man's transformation into a legend that no one can ignore. Prepare yourself for a journey of fire, courage, and the quiet but unstoppable power of justice. This is From Chains to Crown. The sun was setting over the bustling harbor of Ravenport, painting the waters a brilliant shade of gold as Ethan Hayes stood proudly on the deck of his ship, his heart racing with excitement as the salty breeze carried the cheers of the crew. They admired him deeply, for at only he had risen through the ranks with skill and courage. Now he was being considered for command of his very own vessel, a dream he had worked tirelessly to achieve. His captain clapped him on the shoulder with pride. telling him the future of Ravenport's navy would be shaped by men like him. On the docks, Clara waited anxiously, her hands clasped together, her eyes scanning the horizon for the sails she knew so well. When she finally spotted Ethan's ship, her heart leaped with joy. She had been counting the days until his return, picturing his smile and the warmth of his embrace. Tonight would be more than a reunion. It would be their engagement celebration, a night to seal their love and future together. Yet, in the crowded streets of Ravenport, envy brewed like a storm. Ryan, Ethan's childhood friend, stood watching Clara with longing, bitterness clawing at his chest. He had loved her in silence for years, and now Ethan was about to take her away forever. Nearby, Victor sneered, jealous of Ethan's rapid rise in the Navy, while Caleb, always hungry for wealth, saw opportunity in Ethan's downfall. The three men met in secret. Plotting his ruin, they forged a cruel letter, accusing Ethan of treason against the crown, sealing his fate with lies, unaware that by morning, the life Ethan cherished would be shattered, and the celebration of love would turn into a night of betrayal and despair. The night of the engagement celebration was filled with music and laughter, the grand hall glowing with warm light as family and friends gathered to honor Ethan and Clara's love. Clara stood beside Ethan, her eyes shining with happiness as guests toasted to their future. Ethan felt as if his dreams had finally come true. His career was soaring, his love was secure, and his life seemed perfect. Yet beneath the joy, danger was creeping closer. Unseen and silent, suddenly, the doors to the hall burst open, and a troop of armed guards stormed inside, their boots thundering against the wooden floor. The music stopped, and gasps filled the room as swords flashed in the candlelight. The lead officer shouted Ethan's name, his voice cold and commanding. Before Ethan could speak, they seized him roughly, shoving Clara aside as she screamed his name in terror. The guests shouted in protest, demanding an explanation, but the guards ignored them. Chaos erupted as Clara clung to Ethan's arm, pleading for mercy, but her cries fell on deaf ears. Ethan was dragged through the dark streets of Raven, his mind spinning in disbelief. He was taken before Magistrate Arthur, a powerful man known for his stern ways and hunger for prestige. Arthur sat high on his chair, his face shadowed. Ethan begged him to listen, to understand that he was innocent. Arthur's sharp eyes flickered with unease, for he knew Ethan spoke the truth. But Arthur carried a terrible secret. His father had once been involved in a rebellion against the crown, and the forged letter accusing Ethan threatened to reveal this past to save himself. Arthur coldly condemned Ethan to life imprisonment without trial. By dawn, chains bound Ethan's wrists and ankles, and he was forced aboard a prison ship, the dark waters carrying him toward Ironhold Fortress, a dreaded island where men were sent to disappear. Clara's cries faded in the distance as Ethan's world crumbled around him, leaving only despair and the haunting question of who had betrayed him. The first nights at Ironhold Fortress were the hardest. The walls were damp and cold, and the cries of other prisoners echoed through the endless stone corridors. Ethan clung to the belief that this was a terrible mistake, that Clara would fight for him, that the truth would come to light, and justice would prevail. He told himself that any day now, someone would come to set him free. Days passed slowly, each one bleeding into the next. The harsh winds off the sea howled through the cracks in the prison walls, and the salt in the air stung his skin. Weeks turned into months, and months into years, and Ethan's hope began to wither, like a candle slowly burning out. During this time, he heard whispers from new prisoners brought in, and one day a cruel guard laughed as he delivered the news that Clara had married Ryan, the man Ethan had once trusted as a friend. Victor had taken over the very position Ethan had been promised, climbing higher and higher in power, while Caleb spread lies in Ravenport, telling everyone that Ethan had indeed betrayed the crown. Friends turned against him, and his name became a curse in the streets. Alone in his small, dark cell, Ethan felt his spirit breaking. He would stare at the cracks in the ceiling for hours, wondering if it would be better to give up, to let the sea winds carry him away forever. Just as his despair grew unbearable, he heard a faint sound, a slow, steady scratching from beyond the stone wall beside him. At first he thought he was imagining it, but as the nights passed, the sound grew clearer, and a fragile spark of hope flickered within him once more. The faint scratching sounds became Ethan's lifeline. Night after night he pressed his ear to the wall, until one evening a quiet whisper answered his call. Through small cracks in the stone, Ethan met Professor Elias Gray, an older prisoner with a sharp mind and kind but tired eyes. Elias had been at Ironhold for many years, locked away for political reasons he never fully shared. Slowly, they began to speak through the wall, and soon Elias revealed a small tunnel he had been digging in secret as they worked together. Elias became more than a friend. He became a mentor. By the dim light of a smuggled candle, he taught Ethan languages, strategy, history, and the skills needed to survive in a world far crueler than Ethan had ever known. With every lesson, Ethan's mind sharpened, and his broken spirit began to mend. Elias also pressed Ethan to tell his story, and when he heard the details, his face darkened. He revealed the truth Ethan had long feared. Ryan, Victor, and Caleb had worked together to frame him, while Magistrate Arthur sealed his fate to protect his own secrets. One night, Elias shared a secret he had never told another soul. He spoke of a hidden treasure buried on Stormreach Isle, a treasure so vast it could grant Ethan the power to rise above his enemies and take back his life. Together, they planned their escape. But before they could act, Elias fell gravely ill, his voice fading with each passing day. On his final night, Elias pressed a map into Ethan's hands and whispered his last words of guidance. As Elias slipped away, grief filled Ethan's heart, but it quickly turned to fire. He swore to survive, to escape, and to reclaim everything stolen from him. The night was silent, except for the crashing of waves against the rocky island. Ethan sat in the corner of his cell, clutching the map Elias had given him, his heart pounding as he went over the plan again and again. Elias was gone, but his wisdom and courage lived on in Ethan. He knew this was his only chance. There would be no second attempt, no other way out of Ironhold. Either he would succeed tonight, or he would die trying. At dawn, the guards came to collect Ilias's lifeless body. As was tradition in Ironhold, the dead were sewn into thick burial sacks and thrown into the sea to be claimed by the waves. Ethan had hidden himself in the shadows, waiting for this very moment when the guards were distracted. He slipped silently into the sack meant for Elias and pulled the rough cloth tight around him, holding his breath as the guards roughly lifted the bundle. The sack swung in the air before it was hurled into the icy sea. The impact knocked the wind from Ethan's lungs, cold water closing over his head like a heavy blanket. Panic threatened to overtake him, but Ilias's voice echoed in his memory. "Stay calm, fight smart." He struggled against the currents, his hands fumbling for the sharp piece of metal he had hidden, slicing through the cloth with frantic determination. When he finally tore free, he kicked upward, gasping as he broke the surface. The moonlight glimmered on the dark waves, guiding him toward the distant shore. Every stroke burned his muscles, but he pushed forward, driven by rage and hope. When he collapsed on the sand, soaked and trembling, he felt reborn. The weak, broken prisoner had died in Ironhold. The man who rose from the sea was new, a man with a purpose. No longer was his life about survival. Now it was about revenge and justice, and he would stop at nothing to take back what was stolen from him. Ethan wandered along the coastline for days, surviving on scraps of food and his unyielding determination. Though free, he had nothing, no weapons, no money, and no allies. Remembering Ilias's words, he knew his next step was to reach Stormreach Isle, the place where his destiny awaited. He found a small fishing village and offered to work for a crew in exchange for passage across the treacherous waters. The fishermen were rough and suspicious, but Ethan's strength and skill at sea earned their trust. The journey to Stormreach was dangerous. The sea roared with fury, and storms threatened to sink their small vessel. But Ethan never wavered, clinging to Ilias's map and the dream of reclaiming his stolen life. When at last the island appeared on the horizon, shrouded in mist, Ethan felt a rush of hope and fear. Stormreach was a place of legends, whispered about by sailors who never dared to go near it once ashore. Ethan followed the map through dense forests and rocky cliffs. Every step felt guided by Ilias's teachings. After days of searching, he stumbled upon a hidden cave sealed by layers of stone and sand. With trembling hands, he uncovered what lay inside. His breath caught as he saw piles of gold coins, glittering jewels, rare artifacts, and treasures beyond imagination. The wealth was so vast it seemed endless. Ethan fell to his knees, overwhelmed by the power now within his grasp. This treasure would not only rebuild his life, but destroy those who had ruined it. He carefully packed what he needed and left the rest hidden. When he returned to the mainland, he was no longer Ethan Hayes, the sailor. He became the Count of Stormreach, a mysterious figure of influence and power. Every move he made from that moment was deliberate and precise. His enemies would never see him coming until it was far too late. His transformation was complete, from a broken victim to a force no one could dare to ignore. Years passed, and Ravenport changed. New ships filled the harbor. New faces walked the streets. but the power still rested in the hands of the same corrupt men. On a misty evening, a grand ship sailed into the port, its black sails carrying an air of mystery. The man who stepped off its deck was dressed in fine clothes and carried himself with quiet authority. He introduced himself as the Count of Stormreach, wealthy, refined, and untouchable. No one suspected that beneath the polished exterior was Ethan Hayes, the man they had condemned and forgotten. Ethan moved through the city like a ghost, silently watching those who had betrayed him. Ryan now lived in a grand house with Clara by his side. Victor held a powerful position in the city's navy, and Caleb had grown richer by deceiving others. Ethan observed every detail, every weakness, carefully weaving himself into their lives. He appeared generous and charming, offering favors and alliances, while hiding his true purpose. Clara, though she did not recognize him, felt a strange familiarity whenever she looked into his eyes, a feeling she could not explain. Whispers began to spread among the city's elite about this mysterious count who had appeared from nowhere. His wealth seemed endless, his influence unmatched. People speculated endlessly about his past. All the while, Ethan waited with patience, setting his pieces on the board like a skilled player. When the time was right, he would strike with precision, and none of them would see it coming until it was far too late. Ethan knew that to destroy his enemies, he had to strike their pride and power first. And Victor was the perfect starting point. Victor had built a vast empire in Ravenport's trade industry, using lies, bribes, and intimidation to crush his rivals. To the city, he appeared untouchable, a man whose wealth controlled the flow of goods and gold. But Ethan knew the foundation of Victor's power was fragile. With the right push, it would crumble. Posing as the Count of Ethan offered Victor an opportunity too tempting to resist. A deal involving rare shipments and secret trade routes. Victor, blinded by greed, eagerly accepted. Over weeks, Ethan wove a careful web of false contracts and forged documents, each one drawing Victor deeper into a trap. As rumors spread of Victor's dealings, competitors turned against him, and his investors began to withdraw. Ethan manipulated events so subtly that Victor never saw his hand in it. The final blow came when a massive shipment, which Victor believed to be filled with precious goods, arrived empty, exposing him as a fraud. The city's merchants rioted, his allies abandoned him, and his fortune vanished overnight, humiliated and ruined. Victor fled Ravenport under the cover of darkness, never knowing that the Count he trusted was the very man he once betrayed. With Victor gone, Ethan turned his focus to Ryan, the man who had stolen Clara and destroyed his life. Ryan had always prided himself on his honorable image, but Ethan uncovered a dark secret during the last war. Ryan had betrayed his own comrades to save himself. Ethan revealed this truth at a grand gathering, shocking the city and shattering Ryan's reputation. Clara, devastated by the revelation, left Ryan in disgust. Ryan was cast out by society, stripped of his status, and left to face his disgrace alone. As Ethan watched from the shadows, his heart burned with cold satisfaction. 2 enemies had fallen, and only one remained. Arthur had always been the most dangerous of Ethan's enemies. For he was not just a man of power, he was the very hand of the law in the magistrate who had stood in the courtroom years ago and condemned Ethan with a cold, unflinching gaze. Arthur believed himself untouchable, protected by his title and his reputation. But Ethan knew that no fortress was without cracks, and he would find a way to bring the magistrate to his knees. Ethan began by quietly gathering secrets, digging deep into Arthur's past and his family's dealings. Beneath the surface of respectability lay a web of corruption. Arthur had taken bribes, covered up crimes, and even framed innocent men to protect his own power. Worse still, his family was entangled in scandals that would ruin their name forever if exposed. Slowly, Ethan released whispers into the city, rumors that turned into accusations that grew into public outrage. Arthur's allies began to distance themselves. Merchants withdrew their support, and political figures who once bowed before him now treated him with suspicion. Arthur fought desperately to maintain control, but Ethan had planned every step carefully, each revelation cutting deeper, until Arthur's power slipped through his fingers like sand. The final moment came in a private confrontation. Ethan revealed himself, stepping out of the shadows as the man Arthur had thought dead. The magistrate's face turned pale as the truth struck him. The Count of Stormreach was none other than Ethan Hayes, the man he had condemned without mercy. Trembling, Arthur tried to speak, but no words came. Overwhelmed by guilt and terror, his heart gave out, and he collapsed to the ground. As Ethan stood over him, there was no triumph in his eyes, only a cold, quiet certainty. His vengeance was complete, and the final piece of his past had been destroyed. The city of Ravenport was silent in the days that followed. The once mighty names of Victor, Ryan, Caleb, and Arthur now nothing more than whispers of ruin and shame. Ethan had achieved everything he had planned. Every wrong had been avenged. Yet, as he stood on the cliffs overlooking the sea, he felt a strange, hollow ache deep inside him. Revenge had given him power, it had given him purpose, but it had not given him peace. He thought of the years stolen from him, the cold nights spent in Ironhold Fortress, the laughter he had lost, the future he had once dreamed of with Clara. Those memories weighed heavy on his heart when he finally met Clara again. There was no anger between them, only quiet sorrow. She forgave him with tears in her eyes. Yet they both knew the bond they once shared had been broken beyond repair. Clara belonged to a life of light, while Ethan had walked too long in the shadows at dawn. Ethan boarded a ship bound for lands unknown, a trusted companion by his side. He did not look back as the city faded behind him. The legend of the Count of Stormreach would remain in a story whispered in taverns and markets, a tale of power, betrayal, and revenge. But Ethan Hayes was no longer that man. He was something new. As the wind filled the sails and the horizon stretched before him, Ethan breathed deeply. For the first time in years, he felt truly free. His journey of pain and fire was over, and ahead lay a world untainted by the past, a world where he could begin again.